Welcome to the Inner Child Revolution, the podcast. I'm your host, Nico Anna Jean. And today we're going to be talking about parentification, self-blame, and expecting things to fall apart. Have you ever noticed that no matter how capable you are, there's a part of you that secretly expects things to fall apart? Even when things are going well? Even when you've done everything right? There's still this quiet voice that says, it's probably not going to last. I want to talk about where that comes from because for a lot of people, it comes from being parentified. First, I want to talk about what parentification really is. Something that most people don't understand about parentification is that it's not just about being too responsible as a kid. Because it's about what happens when an adult who should be getting support from another adult puts that responsibility on a child instead. Because if that adult were to go to another adult for help, then they'd be held accountable, right? They'd have to show up as an adult. But when they make a child responsible, something different happens. Because if things don't work out, they don't have to take responsibility. They can consciously or unconsciously blame the child. They might say it out loud, or you might just feel it in the room, in their tone, or in their disappointment. And the child takes that in as, it's my fault, I didn't do enough, or I failed, even when there was absolutely no way they could have succeeded. So when you grow up with this invisible belief, no matter how hard I try, it might still fall apart, and somehow it'll be on me. And if you recognize yourself in that, I want you to know that that belief was learned and it is not who you are. It made sense once, but now it gets to change. Here's how this starts to show up in your work and in your business. That belief does not disappear when you grow up and become an adult. It just changes form. So now, instead of worrying about your family system, about the adults in your family, you worry about your business. You're always thinking 3 steps ahead and you're always preparing for what might go wrong because you learned early that you had to be the one to make things work. Another way this shows up is how quickly you take the blame. Because when you were parentified, you got used to being responsible for things you were never trained for. You were expected to figure things out with no support or to manage situations that you were never meant to manage, to carry things that weren't yours. So you learned early, if something isn't working, then it must be me. And that follows you into adulthood. So now in your business, when you don't know how to do something, or when you're learning as you go, when no one ever showed you how, instead of thinking, I just need support here, you think, what's wrong with me, right? You hesitate to ask for help. You start questioning yourself. You start replaying things in your head. And before you know it, you're in a shame spiral. And you're doubting yourself, you're pulling back, and you're maybe even thinking about quitting things that actually matter to you. This also shows up with clients if you're a coach or any kind of consultant, and you start feeling personally responsible for their results. So if they struggle, you take it on emotionally, or if they don't follow through, you wonder what you did wrong. And if they didn't get the outcome you hoped for, then you quietly blame yourself. Even when you've shown up with integrity and care and skill, over time you start seeing failure when there isn't any. Like a solid launch feels like it just wasn't enough, or a client who needs more time feels like a reflection of you, or a learning curve feels like proof that you're behind. Because your system learned early on, if something goes wrong, it's on me, even when it isn't. So there's something really important that I want you to understand about this. This shame spiral does not mean you're doing anything wrong. It is just an old part of you that got activated. And that part learned early, if something goes wrong, I'm not safe. So the first step isn't fixing anything. The first step is just noticing what just happened. Like catching yourself in the moment and saying, okay, something old just came online. And then when you name it, you're no longer inside it, but you're relating to it. Instead of arguing with yourself, or instead of trying to think your way out of it, try something different. Just put your hand on your heart and take a slow breath. And then remind yourself, I'm not a child anymore. I'm not alone in this. I'm allowed to learn and I'm allowed to ask for support. See, that's nervous system communication, and that's you speaking directly to the younger part of you that still thinks failure equals danger. So over time, this gives you more space inside yourself, and shame stops running the show, and mistakes stop feeling catastrophic, and learning starts to feel safe. See, this is what reparenting looks like in real life. Learning how to stay present and kind with yourself when things feel a little shaky. So the deeper work, the really liberating work, is turning back towards your own inner world. It's beginning to see how you were taught to participate in these dynamics. Because at some point, disappearing a little bit felt safer than standing fully in your truth. This is where your inner child becomes key. Your inner child holds the patterns that shaped your self-concept and your identity. It's where you learned who you had to be to stay connected and who you weren't allowed to be to stay safe. So I'm not here to help you stay focused on what's wrong with other people. I'm here to help you remember who you are underneath all those adaptations and to consciously change your identity to match who you're becoming now, not who you had to be to survive. So if you've been listening to this and recognizing yourself and you realized how early you learned to carry more than was ever yours, and if you've seen how that shows up in your work, in your money, and the way you relate to responsibility, I want you to know something. Nothing about you is broken, okay? You adapted and you learned how to survive in environments that were emotionally immature, inconsistent, or unsafe. And in families where there may have been narcissistic patterns, toxic dynamics, or adults who couldn't meet you emotionally. And you learned to become the responsible one, the strong one, the one who held things together, and that got you through. But you don't have to run your life like that anymore. Just by listening to this and by reflecting on it and by letting yourself see those patterns, honestly, you are already activating something within you. You're already shifting how you relate to yourself. You're already choosing awareness instead of self-blame. And you get to build a life and a business that aren't fueled by pressure, fear, or over responsibility, but instead by self-trust, support, and inner stability. This is the heart of the work that I do. And in my signature program, Inner Child Revolution, I teach you how to reparent the patterns that form in those kinds of family dynamics. So you are no longer running your life from those old survival roles, and you're no longer trying to prove your worth through over-functioning. I've also written a book called Healing the Inner Child with EFT Tapping, where I go much deeper into this work and how you can begin rebuilding your relationship with yourself in a grounded, practical way. If this conversation resonated with you and you are a coach trying to build a business or trying to create something new in your business, I have a free masterclass called the 4-Step Method to break toxic cycles and become the coach you're meant to be. And it goes deeper into how growing up with narcissistic or toxic or emotionally immature dynamics in your family can shape your confidence, your visibility, and your income, and how to shift those patterns in a grounded, sustainable way. So you'll find the links in the show notes below. And if you'd like to explore any of that, follow what feels aligned for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for choosing to relate to yourself with more honesty and compassion. This is the Inner Child Revolution, and I'll see you next time.